what would you say is like the bigger challenges that you see working with that individual? Is it the patience of like, hey, these things are going to come. You have to do this for a long time.
It's definitely patience. It's 100% patience. It's you can't relay patience to somebody. Everybody wants, oh, can we? I'm comfortable taking more doses, higher doses. We can ramp it up here. I'm like, we don't need higher doses right now. You're going to be fine. Just overthinking a lot, especially now with all the information that is presented through short form content. That's a lot. That's a big one. Again, especially with the younger guys, the ones that are like 19, 20. It's nonstop. Why is this? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Why aren't we doing 4 reps? It's like nonstop with the questions. Everything is just overthinking. They want to be a perfectionist in every possible outlet. So it's just trying to, for one, patience, and then the second one would be something that I do find myself working on a lot with these guys is helping them mentally, like helping them control their emotions and stress. That's what I really help my, like I have guys do breath work and all that stuff because a lot of them just get like so in their heads, and you could see to reflect on some of their lab work. I'll see their cortisol super high, their sleep sucks, and a lot of them just they're dealing with things that younger guys are dealing with. They're having relationship problems, money problems, and it's just trying to help them navigate how to navigate that mentally and be in a better place. That's what I find myself dealing with a lot.
I relate to that. I think that's the part of coaching that can be unspoken, but honestly, I think that is where the coaching comes in. It is the people part of the service. I mean, like you can change someone's nutrition, you can tell them to do more cardio, you can tell them to eat more, but frankly, like it's the shit that's happening in real time that I feel like, okay, the bottleneck isn't you following what I'm telling you to do. Like you're paying, you're financially invested. The bottleneck is things that are happening on the back end that maybe you don't feel comfortable sharing with me, or maybe you think, okay, it's not that big of a deal. So
Mm-hmm.
on that, how, I mean, like, I guess give me an example, like, with someone who is struggling with the stress management, like you said, the breath work. I love that. That's good. Um, how deep do you go in terms of like troubleshooting some of these issues? Like, do you give them like, hey, you and your girlfriend are fighting and it's fucking with your sleep because then you're doing X, Y, and Z. Like, do you go as deep to be like, do this week, next time this happens?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously all individual dependent, but I've gotten very in depth with a couple guys. Like I've helped guys get better jobs just because they when I was young, I was very, I don't know if it's the word is motivated, but I was, I guess, relentless in a sense. Like I would just figure shit out. Like, if I had financial struggles, like I would go out and just find a better job. Somehow I just fucking would make it happen. Right. So I would like go, I've had plenty of clients where I'll like look up where they live and find like all the restaurants or something and be like, here, go to all these places this week. Go ask to talk to the manager. If the manager is not there, go back the next day. Give them this fucking resume, give them paper. Like, you need a job with more money. You're going to go get a job serving, making tips. Like, this is the best thing I can tell you to do right now in your situation. If I was you right now, this is what I would do to help you out financially. I've had guys where, I create exact schedules, wake up at this time every day, eat a clockwork at this time, because this is what's going to get you working your circadian rhythm in a good pattern. It's going to help just regulate everything, right? Because you feel like you're constantly stressing, you're falling asleep is super late this time and that time, and you feel like now you're overthinking because everything is all over the place. And you just need to get yourself into a set routine, right? So if there's something with relationship problems, it's a whole in specific circumstantial thing. But I mean, yeah, it could get pretty in depth sometimes.
I love that. I love the willingness to be specific, but also really focused on getting them into a better position. Um, do you find that a lot of guys, like a lot of your clients, are open to that, or do you ever run into guys who's like they don't want the solution?
I've run into guys who don't want the solution. That's the thing, is my answer is usually always a solution, and a lot of guys do like it. You don't you feel out the client, right? So some guys, they come to you and they're just a lot more open with you off the bat, and that there's going to be a good relationship there. They're very good at communicating. Like, they want help. They're openly seeking advice. I have guys who will just text me randomly and just like literally try to get my advice on something. Hey, my parents are telling me this, but I want to do this. Like, they'll just come to me and tell me that. Obviously, then you have other clients who don't really communicate at all, and when you give them advice, they're just like, okay, or they're just like the message. So they obviously like just aren't that invested, or they don't want to hear. And at that point, if that's what happens, like, I'll reciprocate that same energy. I'm not going to just keep forcing it. It's just, if you don't want to have that, level of relationship, and you just want me to give you your program and meal plan, that's fine. That's how it, if that's how you want it to be, that's fine. I don't have a problem with it, but not everybody's going to be like that.
I think it's really important as a coach to operate the way you are, where you are respecting your own time and your effort. Because I mean, like, you doing what you do, I mean, like, you have the coaching aspect, which does take a lot of mental reserve. But then you have the business side of things, so the content creation, and like even thinking so far ahead to be like, okay, like, I want to get these people in better positions so that they get better results, so that they feel like, okay, this was a worthy investment and they can go further places. But the limiting factor is their willingness to want to get better results. If they're happy, if they're comfortable where they are, even though they might be saying something that's, completely the opposite, it's like, I'm not going to want this more than you. Like, I've had a few girls who, I mean, like, at any given time, like, I have women who they will share relationship statuses with me around relationships that frankly are just not very safe to be in. And they'll be like, oh, and this is why. And it's like just very subtle. And just be like, oh, and like, I couldn't because the cops were called. And I'm like, you shouldn't have to have the internet tell you that that's not a safe position to be in. Please get the fuck out of there. Like, please do not do this to yourself. Like, are you going to do this for 5 years? Are you going to do this for 10 years? Like, it's only going to get worse. And those conversations, I think, for me are very emotionally draining because I'm invested and I'm like, yo, like, this isn't going to end well. Like, you're lucky if it ends with just a breakup. But seeing like clients who have been in those positions where they've been vulnerable, they've opened up and they've been like, what, I think like what I'm doing, it's just not conducive with these goals that I have relative to what we're doing over here. So I'm going to make this change. It's going to be a little rough this next month. My adherence won't be there, but I'm going to do the best I can. What can we make work? I feel like that has been really rewarding when I've been in that position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing I try to relate to them a lot. Is obviously, like you said, you're not going to want this more than you. Nobody can force you to do anything. At the end of the day, it all comes down to your will. When there's a will, there's a way. That's something I mean, it's pretty fucking cliche, but it's something I am always telling people. So for whatever reason, um, because you can relay all this stuff over and over again, and then you might see them not implement it. And like you gave the explanation, the example of the girl, girls in bad relationships and things like that. And there's things in life where, I mean, at least in my experience, I could say it doesn't matter what you tell somebody. Like, it's, you have to go through shit yourself to really get the lesson. That's what it really comes down to. And you can relay that as much as like, hey, like, you're going through this, and I keep telling you this week after week, and like, you really just sit back and sit with yourself and think about what you really want. How important is this to you? Where are your priorities? You know the answers. The answers are there. And if you make the decision to not pursue that and go that way, like, that's your choice. And it's eventually there's going to come a day where you're sick of it. That's it. And I can't force that day, but it's going to happen sooner or later. And all I can do is tell you about it here now and try to help you make that decision quicker.
I agree, and I think that I have a proclivity for getting people to address that kind of stain on whatever is like hindering their progress. So if it is adherence, I'm like, okay, like, you fucked off on your diet, whatever. Like, okay, let's do, what happened? Like, paint that picture for me. It was at night. It was after you got home from work. Husband came home. Kids were like, rowdy, doing something. You missed your workout. Like, tell me exactly. Help me be there and help me understand what got you to make that decision to be non-adherent. Because even though it felt impulsive, even though it felt like an accident, it wasn't an accident. Like, there was a point, at some point you were like, fuck it, I'm having the cookies, like, they're right there. Like, I've resisted, but at this point, like, I'm giving in. What was that like what caused you to, what was the straw that broke the camel's back, essentially? And I found that a lot of people, like, it might be a little, like, I want to say painful to go there and to admit, like, okay, this was it. Like, my husband came home, he was short with me, and like, he didn't acknowledge that, like, I fucking have been losing weight and I really am enjoying it. And he actually made a comment that, like, he's sick of us not going out to eat or whatever it is. And I'm just like pulling a really loose example. It's like that right there. I'm like, okay, so that was a reaction to something that happened, and like, it felt like the best thing that you can do at that point was to use food as a coping mechanism, which sucks. I'm sorry, like, you were in that position. I'm sorry, like, that is what you felt. Because, like, whether it's appropriate or not, it's not really my place to say, like, whether that emotional response was indicated, was warranted. But in this case, I'm like, let's solve that. Let's solve it to where, like, you don't feel like if someone makes a comment, husband, obviously someone closer, it's going to carry more weight, but even someone in the gym, like, that's something that that's something I'll hear about pretty frequently is like, well, so and so made a comment to me that I am getting a little bulky. Like it really threw off the rest of my workout and I had a hard time focusing. It's like, okay, so these things, we can't control them. They're other people. What can we do to at least handle what it feels like when we have these experiences, when these negative emotions present themselves? Because realistically, you're probably going to go through life and there are going to be people that say shit to you that affect your willingness, your motivation, your desire to stay on plan. How do we create this fortress that makes you impervious to these things when they happen?
Hmm. I think it's extremely important to have self awareness. I think it's so much easier said than done, what you're saying with a lot of people. Again, this comes back to another thing that I'm constantly relaying. It all comes back to the whole mental aspects. There's a book. It's called The Power of Now. I don't know if you've ever heard of this book. Um,
Yeah, no, it's a good one.
yeah, it's something I've had a lot of my clients read because a lot of people are very ego driven, right? They lack emotional intelligence. They lack the ability to really like sit back and reflect on what's happening around them and have the awareness to assess it without this emotional attachment or investment into that, right? So, and if you don't have that, you don't have control of yourself or your life. You don't understand why things are happening, why you're reacting a certain way, and to be able to set that aside and say, hey, this is why I'm cheating and not adhering, and like this is really the root cause behind it. Like you really need to be able to separate yourself from like your ego, your emotions, all that stuff that's invested within that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's extremely important. It's something I have a lot of guys do. That comes in with the breath work, right? Because the breath work makes you more present. It puts you more like a present state. It's like this meditative state, right? So you gonna say something?
No, no, no. I was just taking a big breath because you said breath work a few times. No, I was like, oh, you haven't breathed right correctly. Fucking mouth breathing over here. It's been a long day. Please
No,
go
no,
on.
no, but
Breath
it
work.
helps them. It helps them clear their minds. I mean, it has for me at least. And it's just a tool, right? And it's really the whole point is just to really become essentially more present and not become invested in the things that are outside of your control and understand why you might feel a certain way about something and be able to then make a decision as to how you want to react. Right? Somebody saying this thing to me, I could allow it to affect me. I could allow it to really stress me out. Now, what's going to happen after that? My cortisol is going to spike. My appetite is going to go in the trash. Right? It's hard to really like. It's hard to get good at this stuff, right? Because initially you have that instinct, right? You want to be reactive. You don't want to sit there and try to understand everything. But once you really like put it into practice and always try to have that awareness, you have so much more control of your life and the way that you're able to go about things on a day-to-day basis. And ultimately you are able to therefore become a much more better bodybuilder and get huge.